5 scary ex-boyfriend stories. These stories have been sent in by subscribers or by friends of mine. If you would like to have your story narrated, please consider emailing it to me or posting it on my subreddit page. Viewer discretion is advised. I hope you enjoy these stories. Stalked me using technology. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a friend of a friend. We were mutual friends. We saw each other before, but we never really interacted. We certainly knew each other by name. We met at a party and he was great at first. He was friendly and made good conversation and was pretty good looking too. I was instantly interested in him and we had great chemistry with each other. We met up constantly, and I was so happy I decided to give him a chance. Months in, we decided to go steady and be exclusive with each other. We set our statuses on Facebook and some other places too. We took so many pictures together and posted them on social media. And for nearly 10 months things were going fantastic. He slept over my place plenty of times and I stayed at his too. I really enjoyed being with him. One day I wasn't feeling the best, so I told him I wanted a quiet day and spent the day on my computer in a video call with my friends. We were all laughing and watching a movie together. It was so good to have some girl time together because I spent so much time with my boyfriend. One of my friends, I'll call her Dana, made a comment about missing me and jokingly said that I was spending way too much time with him. The next day I didn't hear from my ex, and it wasn't like him to not send a message by now. I messaged him and said good morning. He looked at it and left me on read. Weird, but maybe he was too busy to answer, and I didn't worry about it. I waited a couple of hours and sent another message to ask if he was okay. He told me he was fine, and I knew he was clearly not fine. He'd never acted like this before and I was surprised by it. I told him if he was angry with me, I'd rather he told me why. He asked how sick I was and I told him it must have been a temporary stomach bug. And that when I felt a little better, I went on a video call with my friends and we watched a movie. He seemed satisfied by my answer. And at the time I wasn't exactly sure why. I was just happy that he had calmed down. Things were good again. But months later we had some more relationship difficulties. He told me he didn't like some of my friends and that he didn't want me to see them anymore. I asked him exactly what he didn't like about them. He just told me he didn't think they were a good fit for me, but wouldn't explain exactly why. There was one person in particular he didn't like, and that was Dana. He always made little nasty comments about her, implying that she was a bad person. I told him I needed a reason why he wanted me to cut them off, and I didn't like him interfering with my friendships. He scowled and didn't speak to me for a couple of days. I talked to Dana about it, and she wasn't sure where the hostility was coming from. She'd always been civil with him. I thought that would be the end of it, but no. He slipped one time and mentioned something I told Dana in private. I thought maybe Dana said it to someone else and asked her about it. She denied it. I was angry about this and he supported me, told me to stop being friends with her, and if I loved him, I would do it. I hated that. I vented to some of my friends both on my phone and on the computer about it. I said how frustrated I was, that he had no right to do what he did, and that it wasn't fair of him to do this. When he confronted me about it, he knew near enough everything I said. I doubted all my friends would have run off to tell him. And some of them barely knew him, or only knew of him. I asked how he knew and he got incredibly defensive. This went on for months, and whenever we had any issues he would always know about them. It turns out he put spyware on my phone and a keylogger on my computer, probably when I wasn't looking or he needed to borrow my phone or computer for something. I confronted him about this massive breach of privacy and he said it was normal. That all couples do this. I screamed at him this wasn't normal at all. He told me that all his exes had been fine with it. And I reminded him that he never even mentioned it to me. and I certainly wouldn't have agreed. Nor did he ever offer to show me his phone or other devices. I got my computer and phone cleared of any nasties, changed passwords, and did everything I could to protect myself. I made sure I changed all my passwords at a friend's place too. After a while, I couldn't relax, so I ended up getting a new phone and computer when I could. I couldn't shake the feeling he was spying on me for a long time after. I make sure to lock all my devices now. I also regularly check to make sure my information hasn't been leaked, and made sure there were no changes to my private information. It has been so stressful, and it could have been avoided if I was more careful. What was even creepier, he left hidden cameras in my room at some point. I'm terrified what he did with those pictures or videos. I change in there. I have so many private moments in there. It's supposed to be my sanctuary. Sometimes I can't escape the feeling I'm being watched. This story won't be the worst story on your list, I guess. I don't let my partners use my devices anymore, unless I'm there to keep an eye on what they're doing. I don't like how he invaded my privacy and had access to my information without my permission. I don't even like inviting people into my room anymore. I just want to feel safe again. Keep an eye on your devices, people. He cheated with someone I didn't expect. Sent in by Anonymous. Cheating is a terrible thing to do to anyone. Not sure if it matters or not, but I'm a 20-year-old gay male who recently came out of the closet. I've had issues accepting my sexuality for a long time, and only recently started to accept it. Every now and then, a part of me wonders what would have happened if I didn't come out of the closet, and if I lived a lie instead. I felt horrible when I came out to my ex-girlfriend. She cried, and I apologized over and over again. I hated how I hurt her in the process. We hugged and she understood. We're best friends now, and we're on good terms. I came out to the rest of my family and most people were supportive about it. I wasn't in any rush to get a boyfriend. I signed up to Grindr and made a profile. It didn't take long before I started receiving messages from people. I found plenty of men I liked and wanted to talk to. There were a surprising amount of people I knew on there, but I didn't interact with them or try to out them. I wanted connection with somebody rather than being intimate on the first date. Finally, I met up with someone. I'll call him Jeff to protect his privacy, and we met up on a couple of dates. Jeff was 40, but was quite attractive, and I like older men. Jeff was perfect and helped me to accept myself, or I thought he did. I spent a lot of my spare time with him, and we talked all the time. He made me feel special and wanted. He was also the first man I slept with. We dated publicly, and I was happy. He wanted me to move in with him really quickly, but I said no. I liked having my own space. I had my own set of keys to his place since I stayed over there all the time. It was easier for me to have my own set. I wanted to surprise Jeff with a naughty surprise, if you know what I mean. Since I wanted to surprise him, I unlocked the door as quietly as I could. I heard music coming from the bedroom, and laughing. I recognized Jeff's voice and laugh. I thought I recognized the other voice. And I realized it was my mom? Obviously there was the betrayal of a parent doing that to their child. But Jeff, he always told me he was gay and had no interest in women at all. As I rounded the corner and looked in the room, I saw them together, and there was no mistake about what they were doing. I stared at the scene in front of me, just in shock. I couldn't speak. It took them some time before they noticed me standing there. My mum leapt up crying and told me she was sorry. She didn't even bother to try to put her clothes back on. I wouldn't let her touch me when she tried to hug me. I just couldn't look at her. Jeff didn't say anything. He sat on the bed and wouldn't even look at me. But I saw him smirking. At least, I thought he did. A lot of the memory after that isn't really clear. I can't remember if I said anything to him or not. I left, drove back home and spoke to my dad about this. It broke my family apart, and my parents ended up getting a divorce. I think they secretly blamed me for what happened. I barely spoke to my mum, but she isn't the main topic here. Jeff never liked my family, and always told me they were trying to keep us apart. Jeff called me up and told me it wouldn't have happened if I was there with him. I told him that was stupid and broke up with him. I wanted to move on and not worry about things. He told other people in the gay community that I had an STD and I was a psycho. It was so damaging to me. I hated my sexuality after this experience. He stalked me on different profiles and I blocked them all. Jeff didn't stop. He kept sending me messages telling me that I belonged to him, and it was only a matter of time before I'd go back to him. I hated how I was so naive that I didn't realize what kind of person Jeff was. The harassment continued for years. He would show up at the house I lived with my dad at. He stalked me at my job. He tried to turn all my friends against me, and did anything he could to bring me back. I hated how he behaved. I hated him. I don't know what happened between him and my mum either. Not that I care. My ex-girlfriend was incredibly supportive, and I couldn't have made it through without her. It took years before Jeff finally moved on and left me alone. He found some other young guy who caught his interest, and I so badly wanted to warn him what he was getting into. My therapist warned me not to, and to go completely no contact with him, and I did. I needed therapy to accept what happened and to move on from it. I've done a lot of work on myself, especially when it comes to dealing with the shame from my sexuality and accepting what happened. I haven't had a relationship since, but I know I'll find the right man. I haven't and will not reconcile with my mother. She is dead to me. I want nothing to do with her now. He thought he was better than me. Sent in by Anonymous. Hi, alright, let's do this. I was in my late teens and he was about 35 years old. I later on found out he lied about his age to me, but that is a different issue. When I met him, he was incredibly sweet and I didn't realize at the time that I was being love-bombed. It was overbearing, and at times, I really didn't like it. It just felt wrong. I don't know exactly when he started, but he would make nasty comments about my appearance, my family and my friends. It was subtle at first. One time, he came over and I was still in the process of getting ready, so I didn't have my hair or makeup completely done yet. He made a joke about me being frumpy and how I looked much better later on. Or if I didn't dress to the nines all the time, he would say I looked frumpy and I wasn't dressing very well. My clothes were always clean, fitted nicely, and I always followed good hygiene. Again, he would always complain if I wasn't super dressed up when I didn't need to be. Keep in mind, this is the man I'd have to remind to shower sometimes. It was disgusting. His room and his car were absolutely trashed most of the time. If I had a biscuit or some other small snack, he would comment about how fat I was getting or would try to grab my skin at my waist, or how I'd need to get on the exercise bike or go on a strict diet. I wasn't fat by any means. I've always had curves and I was quite active at the time too. He was pretty overweight to say the least, and he would regularly ask me if he was handsome, or if I didn't love him because he was fat. His weight wasn't an issue for me. Weirdly, he'd turn around and buy massive portions of food for me, and I told him I can't eat that much. If I didn't try to finish it, he would cry and tell me that I didn't love him, or that I didn't appreciate everything he did for me. I kick myself now for the treatment I was willing to put up with. He said my friends weren't very attractive and would make comments about how he wished I was well endowed like they were. At times, he would also flirt with them, and then gaslight me when I told him it wasn't okay, or if the friend said he was doing something wrong. He commented on my parents' house and said how cheap it was. My family was certainly not wealthy by any means, think blue-collar worker and pretty average, but it was well maintained and they looked after their home, when he did not, so he was pretty much putting me down all the time. When I said it wasn't okay, he would make some offhand remark about how sensitive I was, and that I needed to grow up, that I should develop a thicker skin. Naturally, he couldn't handle what I throw back at him. I got so used to being spoken down to by him, but I wouldn't let him talk down about my parents or my friends. Another thing he would do was always insist how his family were members of the royal family, and therefore I was lucky to be with him. His family were not the best type of people. There isn't anything wrong with being low income or needing social assistance. He and the rest of his family believed because of this connection, They were owed it. It was their right to get money from the government. At first I thought he was joking about it. I've known some other people who have royal or noble connections. Some of them were super into it and others didn't care. But they still treated people like equals because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. He said one thing that made me furious. He told me that his ancestors probably owned mine. He wasn't ashamed of stating a fact with remorse or anything. He was practically gloating about it and loved seeing how angry and hurt it made me. He didn't have any proof to back up his bullshit claims. He said that my family must have been sex workers because they were too petite to work the fields or some other bullshit. I slapped him for that. I know some people would frown on it, but it went way too far for me. He doesn't know anything about my ancestry anyway. Whenever I've told anyone about this, they are so shocked that someone could be this stupid and so lacking in reality. His family were the same way. Especially his father, who emotionally scarred his children and used religion as an excuse for his abuse. Don't worry, I'll send in stories about his father soon so you can hear all about it. Sadly, I didn't break up with him at the time, but yeah, I could write several stories about this guy and his delusions. So expect to be hearing more about him and his crazy ways. I haven't met anyone so despicable in my life, and I never want to. If someone behaves like this, they don't last very long in my life. I'm not sure where he is now, but I hope it's somewhere terrible. If someone disrespects you and those around you, it is a massive red flag, and it is important for you to stay away. He wouldn't leave me alone. Sent in by Anonymous. This relationship changed me. There was a big age gap between myself and my ex-boyfriend. I was 18 and he was 32 years old. I know some people have good relationships with big age gaps. Not all of these sorts of relationships are bad, and some people's work out great. In my case, I was mentally younger than my physical years, if that makes sense, so I was quite naive. When I first met him, I instantly felt uncomfortable by him, and I can't say what put me off. He tried to hug me right away, and I hesitantly agreed. He held on for too long, ignoring me when I was tapping him and telling him, okay, hug over. But I decided that maybe I was being silly. I can be kinda cold with new people. He didn't seem to respect any boundaries I put in place. We'd been seeing each other for maybe a month, maybe two. For example, while we were chatting, we disagreed about something, and I told him I was going out for dinner with my family. My family really didn't go out for dinner very often, so it was a nice treat for us. He demanded that I don't go and told me he'll be angry if I go. I told him I was going and that was that. I logged out and put my phone on silent so I could enjoy the meal in peace. He already started calling and texting me. I had a fun night with my family. The food was great and it was a lot of fun. Hours later when I was done, we were walking to the car and I checked my phone. I received countless voice messages, phone calls, text messages, and then I received a phone call. It was from him. He was panicking and wondering where I was. I told him I was getting dinner with my family, like I told him earlier. He started sobbing that he was so relieved. My dad laughed at him for it. I didn't realize at the time how much of a red flag that was. I didn't tell my family about all the messages and voicemails, or what kind of messages they were. I told my ex I was tired and needed to sleep when I got home. He whined and told me he wanted to talk with me for a while. I gave in and answered his call. He went from guilt-tripping me for abandoning him, threatening to harm himself, being grateful that I talked to him, warning me that he could do better than me and some other girl was interested in him, that he would end his life if I ever left him, and it all went around in a circle. I was exhausted and asked him what was wrong with me going out with my family. He told me I didn't spend enough time with him. I did. If we didn't call or chat, we were seeing each other nearly every weekend. I was quiet and listened to his ramble, exhausted, and told him I needed to sleep. He started up again. This time the guilt-tripping was worse. He was sobbing and telling me that I didn't love him, and I apologized to get him to shut up. I wish I didn't. There was an instant change in him. He was all happy again, told me that he loved me and I was the only one for him. I hung up and felt numb. It hurt, and I didn't really understand what was happening. I sat on my bed and listened to all the crazy voice messages he left for me. Some of them were threatening me. Others, he was crying. It was just a mess. I felt sick in my stomach, and I wish I left him after that, but I was convinced he was going to end his life. So I stayed, for far, far too long. Left me in debt. I met Trent when I was 30 years old. We met in a relatively old-fashioned way, mainly because I shunned online dating and prefer meeting people face to face. I've always trusted my gut instincts when I meet people. We met at a town dance. I come from one of those country towns where everyone knows each other and there's a strong sense of community out here. While people are suspicious of strangers, they tend to turn a blind eye to bad behavior from people inside the community. It was one of the most frustrating parts of living in a community like this. Despite this, I love my hometown. Trent, it is a nickname by the way, was a cousin to one of the more well-established families in the town. If you're not from one of these small towns, it can be hard to understand, but essentially, many of their family members have important businesses and own a considerable amount of property. Trent wasn't raised in town and was raised in one of the big cities. Trent was charming, sweet and caring. Everyone told me how lucky I was to be with him, and if we got married, I'd be set up for life. We dated for nearly 2 years before we moved in together. 6 months later, we were engaged, and he told me how he wanted to look after me. I've been raised by a long line of independent women who want to make sure they make their own money. Over time, I was worn down by the promises and the hope of an easy life. I let him take care of the finances. We lived a good life, regularly going on expensive trips and restaurants. New clothes and a lot of items I really didn't need. I was definitely living the good life. My friends frequently told me how jealous they were I met someone like this, and I thought I was blessed too. Whenever I tried to conserve our power usage, Trent would reassure me not to worry, and that it was covered. I didn't like this. It was wasteful. Trent and I talked about having children together someday. What we would want to name the kids, how we would raise them, and what we wanted for our family. Trent wanted a massive family with around 7 children. I'm not young by any means, and didn't realistically think I could have that many. I told him this and he was okay with it. I had 3 kids with him who are my world. I love each of them. Over time, my focus changed from us having a lifestyle around going out and socializing to raising our children. I don't think he liked the lifestyle change. But he went out of his way to spoil our kids, buying them whatever they wanted when they wanted. I told him it was bad to spoil the kids, and so, in the children's eyes, I was big mean mommy. He told me one day he wanted to leave the quiet country town we called home, a place I lived all my life. We talked about it and looked for places we could go. He seemed really panicked for some reason but wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I kept asking him if I could help, and he got really snappy at me one day, and even punched a wall. He got so worked up. This wasn't the same man I married. I woke up one day and all of his things were gone. He took a bag, left an apology note, and I called everyone. His family, his friends, the police, and there was no sign of this coming. Our children were so scared for their father and missed him terribly. It was when I found the stash of bills and credit cards that had been taken out using my name. I stared at shock at them. He hadn't been paying the bills and there were final notices approaching. I had my first panic attack and woke up on the floor. I thought it was a nightmare, but it was reality. I called up the bank and utilities company and anyone who would listen to me. I called my mum and my friends. I was terrified about what would happen. I was scared I'd lose the house, and called my husband's number, begging him to come home and sort all of us out. It turns out that Trent had been in debt and had done this sort of thing before. There's a police investigation for fraud. I can't believe how stupid I was. It's taking years to properly clear my name and my credit. Financially, he destroyed me, and I wish I kept working to keep up my skills in the job market. Luckily for me, a family friend heard of my situation and gave me a job, advice, and a place to stay while things were being sorted. It was hard on the kids. They were so used to getting whatever they wanted, and then had to make do with whatever we had. They'd ask where their daddy was all the time, and I'd lie to them, telling them that he loves them and will be home someday. I looked for him on social media when I had the spare time. One time I found him, and he was already with another woman. As the investigation went on, I discovered I wasn't the only woman he conned, and if he wasn't stopped, I won't be the last. Ever since I've been trying to repair my life, I'm getting a divorce, and at first his family tried to brush it off or blame me for what happened. I'm not going to be silenced over this. Some of the friends I had while I was living the high life disappeared when I needed them. Here is some advice I have for any young woman or man or whatever out there. Don't blindly trust someone to manage your finances. Always at least be involved in the process and keep an eye on your money. And especially, keep up your job skills in case something happens, just in case you need to re-enter the workforce. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to stab the like button, comment, subscribe, and smack the bell. I would like to thank As the Raven Dreams for the amazing thumbnail. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreons, top tippers, subscribers, and all my viewers. Follow me on social media, and all my links are available in the description below. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.